Hey everyone, Ekman here with another video, and today we have a top 8 breakdown for my EB01.5 tournament that I hosted last night. It was a 64-player tournament with this top 8 that we see here today, and a couple of things before we get started. First, if you guys enjoyed these videos, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. It does help the channel quite a bit. Also, if you guys are interested in what this tournament was all about, so EB01.5 is this format that we have in North America and other places that play the English version for right now until the release of OP07. We have this meta where OP07 is not legal, but EB01 is, but the restriction list is legal as well. So that means that Kouzuki, Great Eruption, and Rejection were banned for this event too. So that's kind of how this little weird format works. We have at least 2 large events, at least here in North America. I think there's others around the world too, but that's kind of why we ran this tournament, just to have that additional like testing session and to see what was going on with it too. So if you guys also want to check out the live stream, it is on YouTube and Twitch for members and subscribers respectively, and it will be also re-uploaded by the end of the week for people who want to watch it here on YouTube as well. So that's going to be the kind of overview for it, and let's just jump into the event itself. So we do see that only 3 leaders top, but it was a top 8 since this was a 64-player event. We did have 3 Trafalgar Laws, 3 Luffys, and also 2 copies of Uta. And I did make a tier list video last week of my thoughts going into this format, and pretty much what I said was I think the best 5 decks for this one are Trafalgar Law, Uta, as well as Gecko Moria. I think these are the big 3 for sure. Luffy was probably my 4th best or 4th favorite one, and then we did have like Nami, Enel, Whitebeard kind of in this like mid tier below. I think I've kind of come around that Enel's probably the 5th best leader in this one. So if I was go to a top 5, these are probably the 5 that I would expect, and maybe not necessarily the best ones, but definitely the ones you're going to see the most often, I think, for these next 2 events that we have. And for the breakdown, we did see 14 star deck, 10 Laws, 7 Utas, 6 Moria, 6 Luffy, 5 Enel, 3 Newgate, 3 of the OP05 purple Luffy, 3 Perona, 3 Sabo, 2 of the Oden, 2 of the OP04 Dofi, and then 2 star deck 10 Luffy as well, the red purple one, and then a couple others from there. So honestly, a good amount of variety, but I do think that if we're kind of boiling it down to 5 important leaders, I'd probably go with these 5. Newgate has temptation, but I do think it lost its good matchup in Kouzuki, and it does have a hard time against stuff like Uta and also Moria, because these guys are 5 life leaders that can be pretty defensive as well. So anyways, we're going to go over the top placing list for each one of these leaders, and we're also going to go over a couple of the unique X2, or all of the unique X2s, which include Enel, Gecko Moria, Oden, as well as the purple Luffy. So let's just jump on into it. So we do have our first place list, which is right here. This is James' version of the Trafalgar Law, and I don't think it's too surprising that Law was very present and also just won this event either. It is, I think, the safe choice in a lot of ways, and rightfully so. There's just a lot of different this is a very flexible deck, especially with Kouzuki no longer around. A lot of decks have a hard time removing 2 bodies at the same time, and that's kind of what Trafalgar Law is really good at doing, being able to play something for like 4 Dawn, and then using your leader effect to play another card from your hand. Being able to do that is tough for a lot of decks, and the fact that it takes advantage of a lot of 4 life leaders right now too, which is pretty strong for it. So some neat choices. We do have the Zoro, which is the 3 cost card that is able to get you an additional Dawn at times. So I think that's a unique choice I don't see very often for this one, but does make sense. Especially, I think it's a little bit trickier to get rid of 3 costs right now. With Great Eruption gone, Moria doesn't really get to do that, as well as Kouzuki gone, so they can't like attack with leader and then or Hound Blaze something. 3 costs are living a little bit more successfully, I think, which also means like cards like Shiraya are in a really good spot too. So I think that's a good choice. Other than that, it's just kind of what we're seeing in general. We do have 4 of the Bond Clay, 4 of the Kitten Killer, Sashi Penguin, Trafalgar Law, and then our top end of Reiju, Missile Sunday, 2 copies of that, the Eustace Captain Kid, as well as the Queen. So I think these are all good consistency pieces for the deck too. So pretty good list, pretty standard. Again, the Zorojiro I think is the tech choice for it, and it's gonna. I think Red Purple Law is gonna do well in this one. It'd probably be. Again, if it's not the best leader, I think it's probably going to be the most present leader in the next couple weeks. So if you do have any decks that are playing in these formats, make sure you know what this matchup looks like. And again, congratulations to James for their win there. Next up, we're going to talk about Black Yellow Luffy, and we had second, third, and fourth all be the Black Yellow Luffy, and the lists are a little bit similar by design of how these decks have to work. So I'm going to talk about all of them real quick. We've got Nicolas, Tass, as well as Cory with their versions of it, and not a lot of difference between the builds. I would say that this build here by Cory is probably the standard build, right? This is I bought 2 copies of the starter deck, and then I added my Hioris, and that's about it kind of thing. So I think that's fine. I think this is obviously more of the consistency build, not as much of the additional cards that can be played kind of thing. You're just doing the combo as much as you can, and I think that's super fine. We also do have Tass's build here, which kind of gets a little bit more of the spice, right? We do have a couple copies of Kouzuki, which I really do like this card in the deck. Next set in OP07, when we do have the Luffy that's able to remove cards, that works just really well with it. There's also just kind of like this weird like turn 2, turn 3 period where we don't really have anything better to do. So Kouzuki's a pretty strong card, and since we get so much card ways to discard dead cards in our hand with like our leader effect or with a Sabo, I think Kouzuki just being able to be played to get that is great. And you are also running the Thunderbolt, which I do like this card in the scenario when we have to go down to 1 life to 0. It's a good way to get rid of a card with off the board and then get your advantage from there. So I do like the add of that one. And then we do have Nicolas version who top placed with second, and then like the additional tech options here. We do have the Kouzuki. We also have like Perona, which again like the same as Kouzuki. If we have nothing to do on like turn 4, playing it to make them discard a card is not too terrible of an idea either. And it's a 2K, which is pretty nice. And then not only do we have the Thunderbolt, we also have the 200 million volts, which I think this is again a tech option for sure. I understand why we will, because it's very easy to get down to 0 life in this deck. So being able to use this effect is easy, and it's good against cards like Borsalino. That I think Borsalino is getting a little bit more representation in this meta and into OP07 with the removal of Houndblaze, or Sakazuki with Houndblaze. I do know like blues are going to be a little bit more present in general, which gets rid of those cards anyways, but I do think that's going to be impactful too. So I think Luffy's a good choice. It does have sometimes a rough matchup into red, a little bit tricky for it, but if you're able to set up and get your loop and go second, going second helps this deck in the matchup I think a lot too. The deck does have a lot of longevity, and I think it's a good deck for this format too. So again, this is Nicolas, Tass, as well as Cory's builds, and congratulations for their top 4 with the yellow black Luffy. And then next up we've got Uta, and kind of the same thing. We do have both these guys placing very next to each other, so I do want to go over both decks, especially since they do also have like a little bit of a deck building restriction. So this is both Jesus's and Eric's build of Uta. So I will say the first build from Jesus is pretty standard. We are running the additional copies of the Hody Jones, which I've been playing a lot of OP07 right now. This card is fantastic in Bonnie, being able to just get another body on board. Resting 2 things no matter what is fantastic, and there will be times where being able to rest their Dawn, like playing against Bonnie, would be really nice too. So I think it's a good pick. Obviously, it's a card that doesn't have the film tag, but we're also only running 6 cards that don't fit that, right? We don't play the Mihawk, which is a decision point for this one. I do think we're playing. No, neither deck's playing the Mihawk. Wow, okay, interesting, because that's usually the card that I see as a concession for a non-film card, because it does do like the Brook combo kind of thing, but being more aggressive with like the Hody Jones is really interesting. So I do think that's strong for this build. And then this one we do have the 9-drop Zoro, which I've been seeing this card a little bit more often. Obviously Sakazuki was pretty good at removing this card, but not as many things are, I think, in general. Ice Age, I think, in black does get a lot of fuel to be able to remove this card potentially as well, but Zoro I think has a better chance in this meta to just hitting the board stick, and if it does, it can just win you the game next turn because of how many attacks and how much pressure it gives all by itself. So I think that's going to be something you have to be prepared for more often, of just being like, if my opponent plays Zoro next turn, what do I do? Do I just lose the game? And there's a lot of decks that kind of have to face that, especially decks like Enel, where you always have to do like 3 attacks to go for game, and Zoro does 3 of them all by himself. It's a lot of pressure. So I don't have much more to say about this deck. I do think it's a good deck in this format. I would say it's one of the better ones, and I think a lot of people will be playing it. And it really just kind of depends if you find your 8-drop kid and it doesn't get bomb decked by your Uta, you have a really good chance of winning because most of your drawing is drawing for only film cards. So you have to kind of be aware enough and get lucky enough to just hard draw your 8 drops and 9 drops. But if you do, you're in a really good point. So again, these are both Jesus's and Eric's build, and congratulations toward their finishes there. So those are all in the top 8, but we do have a couple of our X2s that did make top 16 technically, but there wasn't prizing for this event for it. But we're going to talk about Justice, who ended up getting 9th place with Enel, and I think Enel's in a good spot for this one. I will say that Reject is missed, but not from like the end of game. Obviously, the end of game mechanic for it is really nice, but I think what you're really missing for it is the removal card, right? Otherwise, the only way we can remove cards is with Gadatsu, which means we have to kind of go for like the long game kind of thing where we don't attack into them. And then we just kind of wait until, hopefully late game we can do that. I think Red Purple Law, you're able to do that kind of successfully, but if they put enough pressure on you, you're in a kind of a bad spot with it. We're also adding some cards like Shirahoshi, which came out in EB01, being able to, since there's less Houndblaze in this format, this card gets a little bit more staying power, which is quite nice as well. And then our top end of the Yamato and the Katakuri. We also have 3 copies of Charlotte Perospero, which I thought was an interesting add. But I do think like if this, if you play this on 6 and it stays on the board, this is a really good like card for removal for the rest of the game, and it's a counter card. So it's an interesting choice, but I can see like why you would want to do it. It does seem like a little bit slow and like only good if you play it on like 6 or 7 Dawn, but if you are able to do that, just gets a lot of pushing power from there. And then the events we're running, 3 of the Disappeared, 2 Elthor, only 1 copy of Amaru, and then 3 copies of Raigo. So I think that makes sense too. Raigo, very good for what this deck wants to do anyways. Being able to have like Omni removal is good. It's just really expensive, which kind of stinks for matchups too. Again, like Reject, I think was great for a lot of ways, but the fact that you could just also use it to remove like a 4-cost body on the other side or a 5, like it's just crazy how good that card was in the format. So I don't have much more to say, but congratulations to Justice for their 9th place with the Enel. And then next up we have Mathias with their version of Gecko Moria. Gecko didn't top 8 for this one. Obviously I think there another one who got X2 as well, but it was something that was like the second best deck, or contention for the best deck in the previous format. It's very consistent in what it does and pretty linear, but the things that you get to do are flexible in it, being able to get some cards off your life with Absalom, Hogback, and Perona. I do think that Great Eruption was a big hit for this deck, though. I know it's only 1 card, but it just means it's really kind of tricky for this deck to get some good removal. And if you do, you have to go -1 consistently for it, right? Because previously, Great Eruption just let you, play it. You would just play Great Eruption just for free cycle. Or 1 Dawn cycle for it. So I think this is kind of how the deck has to transition with the inclusions of the Hina and the Brook. When I was playing this deck, I think Brook is like just a really great card for us. There's scenarios where you can get some removal. I think this deck also kind of wants to go second more often now as well, with the idea that you can use Rebecca, Brook, but also just like Hina Absalom on 6 Dawn is a really good tempo play. Also, even like sometimes like Perona and Brook as well gets rid of a 4-cost if they have 5 or more cards in their hand. And this is with playing either Absalom or Perona off your leader effect. So I think that's really good for the deck and what it does. So it just helps you in a lot of ways for just removal and again that early tempo for this deck too. So I think the deck is fine, but again, Great Eruption is such a good card that we're missing 100%. And I don't know. We'll see. I think people are kind of overrating Moria in this format. But I'm also thinking it's really good. It's a safe card to say it's going to be really present. But I do think it did lose a lot of power without Great Eruption. So anyways, this is a build from Mathias, and congratulations for their X2 finish in this event as well. And the next up, we've got Karrar Karrar's build of Oden. And Karrar's been talking a lot about running this deck. He's been grinding really, really hard for it. And also, they released a Patreon guide with Awakened TCG. So if you guys want to check that out, it's linked to the description as well. They've got a lot of good content on their Patreon as well. So you guys can get a lot more information on how this deck works. And I'm just going to quickly go for it, my own opinions with it as well. But I think this is a pretty okay pick for what this meta looks like. When I was playing a good amount of Oden, the biggest issue is that you want to play these 5 costs of either the Yamato, the Denjiro, or the Izo. And if you do, and they're able to stick on the board, they get a lot of good advantage because we do have our leader effect of Dawn ×1 when attacking. If you have a cost 5 or greater Wano card, this gets a +1k until the start of your next turn. So that's pretty great, right? But the issue is that it was very easy for these cards to get removed in the previous format, playing against something like Kouzuki, right? Or even against something like Moria, which can still, technically remove this, but you can just see the lines of like with the 5 cost. Cool. Well, what I do is that I use Great Eruption, Leader Effect, and then Houndblaze away, right? Something like our Ama away, right? There's a lot of ways to get rid of this, and they wouldn't lose any advantage from being able to do that either. So I do think that being able to get these out more consistently and keep them on the board more consistently is a good play for what this format looks like. Also, these 7Ks are really good at not getting removed by Red Purple Law, because if they use a Gordon or a Raise Max, they can't get rid of these by themselves. They need another -1K somewhere. So all of that just is really good for this deck. And then kind of on the top end, we do have cards like Cody Jones being able to just be a good end game. I already talked about Zoro too, but being able to use this to it's hard to remove this in this format, which is really good for the card. And then lastly, we also have Newgate, which this is just great in its own way, being able to if we have 10 Dawn, we can play this card and use our leader effect if we already have a 5 cost, which is great. Or even like at 9 Dawn, Denjiro needs an additional Dawn for it, but being able to be an 8K leader is pretty impressive for this deck too. So that just puts a lot, especially since if we have Izo out, we get like an additional return anything into a 2K. There's a lot of good stuff with that this deck gets to do if it gets the setup and the consistency for it. And I think that's the only other thing is that our card draw is pretty minimal in this deck compared to a lot of other decks, but if you're able to get it set up, it's in a good spot. So this is my my quick explanation. Again, check out their Patreon if you want to check out a more in-depth guide, but I think the deck is great, and I know Karrar has been really grinding on it, so a big congrats for his X2 finish with this one. And then lastly, we do have Austin with their copy of Monkey.D.Luffy. I think this deck is in an okay spot. I do think it lost its worst matchup in Kouzuki, and it generally has an okay time against yellow, at least when it was doing more in OP05. It is a deck that, again, you are really good until you don't find your top end, right? There's Kaido's a really good card, but we have no way to search it in this build right now. We do also have the 7-drop Kid, which I like a little bit more in this format. Again, I think Kouzuki being away means they could remove this card very easily. There are still ways for you to remove it as Moria, but Moria doesn't have as good amount of a time doing so. So this card I think gets to hit the board and stay on board a little bit more consistently, which is helpful. I think Magellan is a good card because there's a lot of decks that get negatively impacted with this card as well, including yellow, and Uta can be put off their curve. And if you're able to just kind of do this and get your tempo game of playing out your 4 drops and getting that additional value, I think that's very good. So an unusual card is this Uta. We don't see this card as often, but this is a fantastic card against Red Purple Law and also Moria potentially, where this is able to get a double block of being able to block the first attack and then also rest another card that came out. So I think this is a good tech choice for this one. And then just kind of the rest of the build. We also have the Poly and the King, because again, there's just, if you want to beat Red Purple Law, you have just so many ways to remove these 4 costs, with Poly being able to do so, King being able to do so, getting up to Kaido being able to get there some removal. I think all that's very good for what you want to try to counter with Red Purple. And I'm not sure how it did 100%, but being able to go X2 I think is impressive with this deck too. So I think this deck could probably get some tops. I don't know. When I made my tier list, I think I put it on the bottom side of it, but I could see it still doing well. It's just the consistency from it. It's just either you find your cards and you're doing really well, or you're just using your queens and hoping you find your pieces, and if not, you're just not really doing much either. So anyways, this is Austin's build, and congrats for their X2 finish for this event as well. And that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you again for everyone who showed up for these events. They're very fun. I really appreciate being able to host them and you guys having a good time with it. So we should be doing an OP07 one sometime in the first couple weeks of July, especially once I'm finished moved in LA as well. But it should be fun. And if you guys are participating in any of these events in the next 2 weeks, please let me know how you do, and I hope you guys have a good time and good luck with it as well. And it should be a fun little format before we get into OP07. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.